Okay, I'm heading home, about to go light the candles for Shabbat, and was just returning a movie real quick. Anyway, something that occurred to me as I was driving here and taking that movie back um, was sort of the similitude to the situation in Protestantism with regards to Martin Luther, the anti-Semitic things that he said, and really the absence of criticism of that character in the story of Christianity and in the story. Let me buckle here. My car's beeping. In the story of Protestantism and its sort of rise to prominence. Well, it's similar in the case of the Islaamicate world. That is, it's not Islamic, but it associates itself with Islam whilst not being Islamic at all. In fact, in many ways, being completely antithetical to Islam. So in that regard, the anti-Semitism, and I'll explain that word in a moment, that's emanating from a lot of neo-Salafi Wahhabi groups in the so-called Ummah today, so-called Muslim Ummah, so-called Muslim and so-called Ummah, is really not challenged in the same way. And this is what the problem is. So a person like me can post images of just a myriad of individuals at rallies that purport to be for the rights of the Palestinian people that end up getting hijacked by these neo-Salafis. And they'll have signs, get ready for the real Holocaust, and close Guantanamo Bay and reopen Auschwitz, and parents, hide your children, rabbis are everywhere. Different hateful stuff like this, even having their kids hold things like that, as well as, well, I don't know what it was, like God loves Hitler or some stupid shit like that some niqabi women had that they were holding up at a protest. That's really neither here nor there, because when somebody doesn't want those sorts of things, that sort of underbelly of the so-called Ummah highlighted or exposed to the light of day, they just simply say, well, this isn't all Muslims. Well, of course it's not all Muslims. The problem is that nearly all Muslims are complicit in these crimes, in that they don't organize to fight this. They don't stand up even when someone is standing next to them at a protest. They don't say anything about this bullshit. So they're complicit in the crimes. Yesterday, there was a 7-year-old boy hung by the Taliban. I've heard very little outrage. Well, next to no outrage. I've heard very little about it at all from the Muslim world. Almost no outrage from anyone. At the same time, we have reported 40 dead Muslims from a bomber from the Taliban who bombed a wedding party, or a wedding itself, and 40 Muslims died, just like these terrorists murder Shia and Sufis all the time in Pakistan and Pakistan, if I want to be like Obama, Pakistan, Afghanistan. This happens, all the time, and the so-called Muslim, so-called Ummah doesn't let out a peep. So they are complicit in the crimes, by standing idly, silently, while this goes on. And particularly those Muslimin in the West, in countries that are places where they are free to protest and voice dissent, they're particularly culpable, in that these are places where they can express, can voice dissent. Some Muslims would say, well, I'm going to go to jail or be killed if I do this in my country. So that's fine. I'm not necessarily saying that that's what they should do. I'm not saying that they shouldn't do it either. But I'm mostly talking about Muslims in those countries, in those Arab countries and in those European countries, Western countries, Asian countries, different countries where they could protest about this, and they don't. And yet, the Flotilla raid, one ship happens to have some violent IHH people who hijack the protest, the peaceful protest on behalf of the Gazan people. They hijack it. 5 other ships, not a problem. All the other ships that have come through, including ships, flotillas, Jewish flotillas on behalf of the Gazan people. All of this doesn't receive the attention, but just this one particular boat in this flotilla relief protest had violent IHH people on it, and this became like the kutub of Muslim attention. This became the axis around which the Muslim world revolved for about a week and a half. This was proof of that there was evil in the world, and that evil was Zionism. And Zionism was some monolithic notion, and how easy, nice, and tidy it is that the world exists in these black and white terms. I haven't heard any of that rage about the 7-year-old boy who was murdered by this Dajjaalic cult led by this one-eyed monster. I haven't heard anybody talk about that. And I'm just really confused by it all. So when I highlight the ideological descendants of the Nazi collaborators in the Muslim world, when I highlight the fact that Iran changed its name to highlight its Aryanism while it was negotiating its Aryan status with the Nazis in the 30s, when I highlight pictures of various different groups that purport to be freedom fighters giving the Nazi salute in the Muslim world consistently, when I highlight these pictures of Nazi-influenced so-called Muslimin at protests supposedly on behalf of the Palestinian people, I'm doing this because by you not speaking out, you are complicit in their crimes. By you not organizing protests against the Taliban, against the murder of Shia in Pakistan. You'll have to forgive my English pronunciation or mispronunciation. By not organizing those protests, when you do organize them for people on one boat being killed when they erupted in violence, which you can argue about the legitimacy of that violence, but that's really neither here nor there. They engaged in violence with a state that they would have been the first to tell you was a violent state. And as Jesus said, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. And they died by the sword. They died by their own violence. They knew that they were going against a violent state. They clashed with that state violently, and they died. For that to evoke more rage in the Muslim world than the hanging of a 7-year-old boy and the murder of 40 Muslim wedding-goers, that this is just shrugged off. It's nauseating. And people in the West, people in Israel, Jews around the world, Christians, notice this, notice the inconsistencies, and it's very difficult to take the complaints of the Muslim world seriously in the West when there's this lack of consistency. So I implore you, if you want the West, if you want the world to listen to your complaints, then show some consistent opposition to oppression across the board, not just when it's Jews doing it or Christians doing it to Muslims, but also when it's oppressive cults that are offshoots of Islam, deviations of Islam. When it's those cults doing it to Muslims, you need to show at least the same amount of rage and outrage, if not more. Shabbat Shalom.